Well, hello. I'm Liz Carlisle. I teach in the Environmental Studies program at UC Santa Barbara, and I'm here with Kelly Mulville, who is the Vineyard Manager at Paicines Ranch. We're in San Benito County on Mutsun territory, and just for orientation, about an hour south of San Jose and a couple hours north of San Luis Obispo. And Kelly, this is the vineyard I said at Paicines Ranch. Kelly has also designed and advised vineyards actually all over the country and in Australia and Spain and China. But this is his home vineyard project and kind of his dream vineyard he's designed here. So he's going to give us a little tour. But first, I just wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about the land we're on here. And sort of the land that you're working with here as you were establishing this vineyard.
We're in, I think it's the Paicines AVA, so it's an established viticulture area. This was former home to Almaden, or to part of Almaden Vineyards, which was 6,000 acres of wine grapes back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so this had been in vineyards probably, 30 plus years ago. It's been fallow since then, since about 2017 when we planted this. The soil type is Diablo clay, so we have pretty heavy clay soils. It's varied though. We did a bunch of pits out here and we found river stones on top of the hills just below the surface. And so the soil is really pretty varied. We came about this project through a presentation that I gave at Eco Farm, and the owner, Sally Calhoun, was at that presentation. And I was talking about grazing vineyards during the during the growing season of the vines. In general, vineyards are grazed during the growing season, or the winter time when the cover crop is growing. But you can't graze them during the growing season because the sheep will eat the vines. They really like grapevines. I've used sheep to remove vineyards. So we, at the end of that presentation, I mentioned that really what we need to do is figure out how to design a vineyard so that it could be grazed throughout the year instead of modifying vineyards, which is one way we can do it. I've modified a number of existing vineyards so that you could graze them throughout the year. But the idea with the reality of climate change and trying to design a system to work with grazing animals from the get-go was kind of a unique challenge. And so I presented that at the end of my talk, and Sally Calhoun came up to me and said, I would like to talk to you about doing this at our place. And so I came out here and we discussed this a bit, and after going back and forth for about a year and a half or so, she talked me into coming out here and putting this in. It was a great opportunity to you throw something out there that you wish would happen, and all of a sudden someone says, yeah, let's make that happen. So this has been a really fascinating, fun project with a lot of ups and downs, but the ups are increasing and the downs are going down.
Always good to hear. When was that? When was that conversation? These vines that we're looking at here, when were these established? How far into the project are you?
So we are, these vines, the entire, what we call phase one, so it's a 25-acre vineyard. The first 12.5 acres was planted in 2017. And we've been planting a little bit in the same section ever since then. We planted the second section to rootstock last year, and we'll be grafting that next year. But we had a lot of issues with squirrels and some issues with nursery stock that was underwater during 2017 winter. So we ended up having to replant about 2/3 of the vineyard, and we did almost all of that into rootstock and have grafted it since then. So that's why it's a great training site. We actually have several young people working with us now, because we have vines at all stages, from freshly grafted vines who are just young and small to vines that are going into pretty good production right now. So it's definitely been an ongoing struggle, not a clean plant everything, everything comes up, it's at the same level, and so we don't have uniformity yet. But we have a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of grapes are you working with? And did you make those choices because you're grazing out here?
So actually the choices of our rootstock and the clones that we used were mainly based off of the fact that the climate here and anticipating what was happening with the climate. So this is the average rainfall here is 12 inches. And I think we've had, since I've been here about 7 years, I think we've had 2 years that we hit the average. And every year after that, every other year has been below that. So we're a dry area, and so we chose 1103P and 110R as our rootstocks, which are both very drought hardy. And then for our varieties of grapevines, for wine grapes, we looked at things that are growing in hot climates, hot to very warm climates that are doing well. So that more than half of this first section is in Grenache. In addition to that, when I came out here, Sally said, okay, you can have any site on the ranch to plant as long as it's already been farmed before. She didn't want to farm anything that had never been farmed, which opened up over 800 acres of possibilities, really. Wow. But this site is fairly close to headquarters. We had water pretty close to here already. And this hillside slopes towards the north. So we're looking north this way. So that means it will be a little cooler. If you look around in this area, most of the perennial vegetation is on the north-facing slopes. So we're trying to mimic what nature is doing here, and trying to gain a little bit of coolness. And so and then we also position this so that the winds would blow up the rows. Actually, we're early enough to beat the wind that's going to come from the north because we have wind coming from the south right now. But once the wind comes from the north, it blows up the rows. In this particular type of training system, if we were to go against the wind, we risk the possibility of all of our shoots going to one side, kind of like a bad comb over. Just blow over to one side and expose all the fruit. So we wanted to avoid that. So we had to pay attention to wind direction pretty carefully, and paying attention to aspect and slope and things like that. So we also wanted good drainage for frost. Not actually the guy who'd been working there the longest, who had been here when they were farming grapes here, said that we would never experience frost here. We've had 4 frosts here this year. Wow. First time they've probably had frost here in I don't know how long. Wow. So, but that's those are things that with climate change, you just have to throw everything on the table as possibilities. So not only does it seem to be getting hotter, but it also seems to be getting colder. So it's not just warming. So trying to be prepared for that. So actually, in that regard, there's a lot of things that we're doing, like this trellis system in particular. This is the Watson system, and I learned about this from Fritz Westover, who used to be the Vineyard viticulturalist at the Vineyard team. And this is primarily being used in Texas. As far as we know, nobody is using this in California. There's some training systems that are pretty close to this, but it's divided. It's almost like an elevated VSP that's divided 2 ways. So we come up and go out with arms both directions, but then our shoots also divide and split in like a V. And what that does is we're allowing some shade because of this. So we've got shade for the fruit, which is also shading the vineyard floor, which helps keep things cooler. And then we also have obviously we've trained these pretty high. We're at about 65 inches or so, right at the cordon wire. And a sheep, if it stands on the back of another sheep or balances itself for a little bit, can just about reach the bottom leaves here. And that's what we want. We want the sheep to have contact with the vines, in particular because they can do all the suckering for us. So in most vineyards, you'll get suckers that come off the bottom, And we can see a few down here, but the sheep have just been through here, so they took care of most of them. But by having the sheep in here during the growing season of the vines, they can take care of the suckering for us. That's one of many benefits that they have. And part of the, it was about 10 years ago, I did a trial in Sonoma County on this idea of grazing during the growing season of the vines. And I just modified it in an existing vineyard to do that. And so from that trial, we learned a lot of things. For instance, that the sheep will do all the suckering for you, that they pretty much reduce the need for a lot of outside fertility. So they are, it's not that they're bringing in fertility, but they are cycling the nutrients that are on here already and helping to make a lot of that stuff more available and more quickly available too. And a big part of that is through their urine, but also through the manure. But so in addition to suckering, they're taking care of the vineyard floor and keeping the forage. So all of a sudden we don't have weeds. Everything becomes an opportunity. So what we have in here is a bunch of mixed forage, which so we in viticulture we spend a lot of time worrying about floor management. And one of our goals is to keep the floor covered in either living plants or vegetation, dead, dormant vegetation. And so the sheep allow us to do that without bringing machinery in here. So that's reducing our fossil fuel, it's reducing our compaction, and it's, again, cycling all those nutrients. So really what we're doing is just trying to mimic natural processes. And the other thing that's happening because of that is we have two crops here. We have sheep, which we primarily grow meat sheep. So we're growing Dorpers and Katahdins. And then we also have the grapes. So if it's a bad year for grapes, it might be a good year for sheep, and vice versa. Ideally, we'll have good years for both.
You've definitely got me sold on the benefits of grazing sheep through this vineyard. And we actually just saw them a few minutes ago. But I wonder, I mean, of course, I'm an environmental studies professor, so all this stuff about all the benefits and the synergies makes a lot of sense to me. But I imagine that when you talk to other folks who are wine growers, people are still pretty nervous, I would guess, about planting a really high value crop that they're going to invest a lot of time and money in, and then grazing animals through, because that's just not the way we typically think about doing vineyards. I'm curious, what you say to folks when you're advising people about kind of key things that you've done here that have made that work, or things you've learned along the way.
Yeah. So first off, I think people are wise to be nervous about that because if early on people were trying aversion training, in which you feed sheep grape leaves outside the vineyard, and you put in a substance that makes them sick, basically. And then the idea is when you put them back in, they will not eat the grape leaves, which tends to work for a little while until someone figures out that it doesn't work anymore, that they don't get sick off the grape leaves. And if that's in the evening and you come back the next morning and you have 200 sheep in there, you could have a wreck. So you need to, because sheep do love grapes. It's interesting that ovine and vine are very similar. So that's the reason why we're spending so much time trying to figure this out. And it turns out now we're learning that there's a group in Germany who's been working on this for a couple of years now, and they just contacted us because we're actually ahead of them by about 10 years, which is great to be ahead in engineering of the Germans. But and other people have been probably trying out ideas in this. So and this is a really simple idea. We've used electrified wires very successfully in existing vineyards to graze during the growing season of the vines. But this idea was the thought was to go beyond just modifying something that wasn't designed for that. So to create and then bring in all the other elements that are possible, the shade, the aesthetics. I mean, I just love it that I can do this. So and the sheep can do that too. So the sheep are not limited to one row, and so the vineyard becomes, instead of very linear, which it still is in a way, it's you have access in all directions. So we can fence off with just a couple hot wires. We could fence off a small section if we wanted to graze it or concentrate the animals in an area. So there's this idea of design and designing agricultural systems, because in a sense we don't really design them. We have machinery and we adapt our systems to our machines. And so we're trying to kind of reverse that and adapt and design our systems for natural processes. And so that our spacing is fairly wide, but we're 12 feet wide between rows and 6 feet between vines, and that allows with the grow over, that's kind of 8 feet of effective working area. We could come in a little bit tighter, but as I'm spraying sometimes I think this is pretty good. But with this training system, because we're kind of doubling the what you normally would in a regular VSP system, our yields should still be pretty good. And there's plenty of people in Texas who have, and I think some other southern states who have done this, who have verified that you can get pretty good yields with this, even with wide spacing. But also that allows a larger area for grazing too. And we have, right now I think we have over 3,000 sheep on the ranch. So we have the option, we just have about 23 rams in here right now, but we could have the option of bringing in 1,000 sheep through here very quickly, or just having a few in here for a short time. So we have those options in here with the spacing and the whole setup of this. So again, it's one thing that we're designing for is ease of farming, and that's really important for people who are farming. And if you have an animal who's doing your suckering, a lot of your fertility, taking care, eliminating the need for mowing and weed control, then a lot of that is contributing to that ease of farming. So we're just trying to take advantage of these natural tools, which are, by the way, powered by solar energy through living plants. So
they look pretty happy here.
Yeah. And they like to make sure that I'm being truthful.
Do you want to walk us through and show us a few things?
Sure. So so this is actually the first year that we'll have a commercial crop, and some of these vines, like there's as we come through here, you'll see some of these vines are just now getting up. So it'll be another year or two before we get anything off of these. So we've got a mixed bag here. Harvest will be a little bit sporadic, but the system this Watson system is working really well. The vines kind of naturally divide on their own as they come up. You think it's just going to be a big mess and everything's just going to be growing straight up or flopping one way or another, but they tend, in general, to just divide themselves, which is really kind of elegant. So I'm pretty happy with that. And again, there are I've seen a number of vineyards in California that were already trained high enough where you could run sheep under them. But I've never seen anybody taking advantage of that. We're hoping to change that. There's actually a young guy who just got into Davis to work on his PhD, and he's going to be specifically looking into the benefits of grazing throughout the growing season in vineyards. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of that research. And along with that, we're looking for people who want to be involved in that. So we're looking for people who are willing to try something, either modifying an existing, probably mainly modifying an existing vineyard unless they already have something high enough to look at that, look at the benefits of that. Because we think that they're going to be, well, we already are seeing a lot of benefits from past work and current stuff. So it's pretty exciting.
So opportunity to be involved in some experimentation and research. Awesome.
So we also have our drip line up higher, and that's because oftentimes the drip line is below the fruiting zone, which is more like around here, and so this keeps it up out of the way. We have had a few issues with this in that the ideal time to irrigate is actually night, and so because we have less wind, and we positioned these evenly spaced apart, but it turns out when the wind comes during the day, it kind of pushes all the water this direction. So we've had to put some tubes on the smaller vines to concentrate the water right underneath. But once we get to the point where we can start watering at night, that'll kind of alleviate the wind problem. But there's always little things like that that you need to compensate for. Another thing that I wanted to show is how this soil is covered here. You can see we've got a pretty deep layer of organic material covering the soil surface. I've seen differences of up to 50 degrees between bare soil and soil that's covered in just a matter of 4 feet. So that's again is another way to help keep the vineyard cool during and retain water, retain moisture in the soil.
And are you planting this forage, or is this just what was here?
So actually, most of this is what was here. We did plant. We have been planting cover crops since before we started developing this, and the this year we had 5 inches of rain. Most of it came in one storm in March, and we did have enough in November that I think a lot of the cover crop that was in here germinated but never came up. And so the majority of everything that's in here came up on its own. And one of the things that's pretty exciting is we are seeing a lot of native plants coming back into this system. The milkweed that's coming up in here, which is covered by pollinator insects. And it's just great to see that happening. And that's a native plant, comes up in the summer. It must have mycorrhizal associations or something to be growing like that. And the sheep don't need it. So it's actually probably kind of toxic to them. So we're seeing kind of, and that's my hope, is actually that we transition less and less to relying on cover crops and more on creating conditions that are conducive to the natural vegetation. And because those are the things that want to be here. And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, this is not just about growing grapes and raising sheep. It's about restoring ecosystems. Because if farming is just a degradation of our ecosystems, then we're not going anywhere. We're not leaving anything for future generations of any life. So we need to reverse that trend. But we need to reverse it and still be able to stay in business. And the great thing about this is it's reducing costs. It's reducing reliance on heavy machinery, fossil fuels, and kind of diversifying the farm too. For one thing, to me it's a lot more fun to farm this way. But so this is something we're really happy about, is seeing the soil cover. The other thing that's pretty fun is a lot of what we consider problem weeds in wine growing are the first things the sheep eat. Things like bindweed and some of the thistles and things like that. The sheep just go right after them. So that's really fun to see. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, since we're talking about soil, is we did baseline research here before we planted anything. And so we did pits, and we have results of what our soil carbon levels were, our soil organic matter. And before we even planted the vineyard, just in using planned grazing, holistic planned grazing with both sheep and cattle, we had increased our soil carbon levels, our soil organic level, by over 1%.
Wow.
And so each 1% increase in organic matter amounts to about 18 to 20,000 gallons of water holding capacity increase. And so we're still waiting for results from our test this year, but I think we're probably closer to 2% now. And that's a lot of water. So I think that will again allow us to be more resilient in the face of climate change. And hopefully, if we do get good years, we may not even have to irrigate at all. So that's the hope. But it's a continual process. We're continuing to build organic matter and litter and diversity and all of those things that help make the vineyard more resilient and beautiful and fun to be in. So we are doing kind of on the research side, we are involved in a number of projects here. We have a staff person who's a soil scientist, and so he's been doing most of the soils work here. Davis has done some work here, and we are also looking at the bird numbers in this area, and so we have several professional birders who have come out here and done birding. We've put up a bunch of bird boxes, owl boxes, bluebirds, tree swallows, and then we just this year started doing some entomology surveys, and we're doing that in conjunction with some other vineyards in the area, some of our neighbors. So we're looking at what's going on with insects here, and it's a guy who just finished his PhD in entomology, and so we had him design something that would be relatively useful information for farmers, for people that are growing stuff, to see what's going on with changes in the insect communities. And so we're still waiting to see what comes out of that. We're hopeful that our insect populations are good, because which some growers might think, what the heck is he saying?
Like, you're grazing sheep
Right.
through your vineyard, now you want insects.
Right. But I heard an interesting statistic that 98% of insects are beneficial, or at least not damaging.
And there's definitely, it seems like vineyards are one of the systems where there's quite a bit of research on good bugs eating bad bugs.
Yep.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of people looking at beneficial insects and trying to adjust spray programs so you're not taking out the good guys. So that's all part of this is increasing diversity at all levels, because we just feel like in a healthy natural ecosystem there tends to be high diversity, and so if we can get diversity back, and as much of the native diversity back as possible, then I feel like we're on the right track. And if we're producing really great wine and high quality fruit, great, happy, delicious sheep, then everything's going good.
Yeah. I mean, anything else in particular you want to show us? I was curious to ask you a little bit too about, pest control in this system. What have you had trouble with? And it might not even be about this system. It might just be, specific to this place. And what have you found are kind of the best ways to deal with your most problematic pests?
So probably like most people in California, powdery mildew is an issue. And we are certified organic here, so that kind of narrows down our options, but hopefully it increases our impetus to get creative. And so we are working on that right now. We are at today, I think, is July 15th, so we're in the middle of July, and we have not had to use anything with an EPA number on it for powdery mildew so far. And we've got a pretty interesting foliar program that we're doing, and using a lot of biological products in really small amounts. But that's again part of our experimental nature here, is trying to figure out how we can, because even things like horticultural oil and sulfur, they're organically approved, and all of us in wine growing have used those things, and they can be pretty effective, but they can also be pretty hard both on the vines and on the beneficial insect populations. So it's kind of looking at the big picture and what are our options there. And I think we have a lot to learn in that area, just about how do we increase plant health and the ability of the plant to resist disease and pests, and what are the various options out there. And a lot of people are looking at that now, so it's a pretty exciting time to be trying to figure out how we move forward with this. And sulfur's been used probably since vineyards have been around, so it's okay to start looking for other options.
Yeah. Well, maybe, I mean, just to wrap up, if you can tell us a little bit about, what your vision is for the next, 10 years of this vineyard. What's next here?
This year will be our first crop. We don't have a winery here. And the idea is that we can be wine growers and it can be viable. It's pretty tough to just grow wine grapes and make a profit at that. So we're doing wine grapes and sheep. But also we think that we're going to be producing really high quality stuff, and we have a lot of people that are interested in these grapes. And I think there's a lot of consumers that want wine that, I mean, if they're supporting a winery, a vineyard that is helping to restore ecosystem health, then count me in. That's what I'm looking for. And so I'm trying to create the things that I would like to have. And so we are working with winemakers that believe in what we're doing and will help us promote this, because we can also help them promote their wines. We have a lot of educational events, weddings and things here at the ranch, so we can feature those wines. And I think developing a good relationship between a number of wine growers and ourselves and the people who are drinking that wine, so that everybody has a role in this and can support restoring ecosystems. And I'd like to see that occur in all aspects of farming, where people are getting more creative and about restoring ecosystem health, and not just getting beyond the let's try and do as little damage as possible, to saying, okay, that's not a good relationship. and for anything. So how do we be beneficial to the ecosystem? How do we help support a healthy ecosystem, which in turn supports healthy communities and healthy economies? So that's the hope here. We'll continue planting grapes, and we're focusing on kind of a little bit more off main varietals, and I think some of this stuff is going to be really good. Hopefully all of it will be. But we planted a Certico, which is a Greek variety, and there's a little bit in the country right now, but we don't know yet. And so, and with the climate changing, you may be surprised at what works out well and what we end up grafting to something else. But we're excited about this year, and excited to continue forward with this and getting more people interested in looking at this, because the more people that are involved in creative ways to restore ecosystem health and farm in ways that are helping to reverse climate change and reverse soil degradation and reverse loss of diversity. So we want to create positive loops instead of negative loops. The more people working on that, the more we exchange ideas and share ideas, and the faster we're going to move forward with this.
Exciting.
Yes.
Well, I'm really looking forward to continuing to follow the vineyard here at Paicines Ranch. And thanks so much, Kelly Mulville, Vineyard Manager here at Paicines. And thanks everybody for watching. Thanks Sustainable Ag Expo for inviting us.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you, Liz.